Good morning. You're watching a special edition of Business World Live. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Let's go straight to our top story. The Bangko Sentral expects inflation in December to settle at 2.9% to 3.7% on the back of higher prices in oil and agricultural produce. Data from the Department of Energy showed that oil firms cumulatively raised pump prices from 2 pesos and 65 centavos to over 3 pesos a liter during the month. However, BSP Governor Ben Jokno said there are downward pressures that could offset price increases in some commodities. These include lower electricity rates from Meralco, cheaper rice, and the continued strength of the peso against the dollar. Inflation rose 3.3% last month. That is the quickest in 21 months. Year-to-date inflation stands at 2.5%, while within the government's target range of 2 to 4%. The Philippine Statistics Authority will release the December inflation data on January 5. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic did not spare the government's massive and ambitious infrastructure program in 2020, but the government is confident that it can build its way to economic recovery next year. In the 10 months to October, public spending on infrastructure plummeted by 18.4%, due to construction delays and discontinued projects caused by lockdowns. The Public Works Department also suffered the biggest budget cut this year as the government scrambled to reallocate funds for the pandemic response. The DPWH budget was sliced by 122 billion pesos by the end of April because of the Bayanihan Law, leaving one of the Build program's main implementing agencies a 459 billion peso fund for 2020 from the previous 581 billion pesos. Big-ticket infrastructure projects under the Build blueprint have resumed construction when quarantine measures started easing in June, but the palace said all projects were subject to reprioritization. The government soon announced that 8 of the program's infrastructure projects have been dropped, while 13 were added to the list, including the construction of the Virology Research Institute in New Clark City. This research facility aims to prepare the country for future pandemics. Just as things couldn't get worse, the number of jobless Filipinos soared to a record high of 17.7%, or over 7 million back in April, as the country faced a recession in the second quarter. The government assured the public, though, that infrastructure, through its high multiplier effect, will generate more jobs and in turn revive the struggling economy. Aside from economic impacts of the pandemic, alleged anomalies also marred Philippine infrastructure in 2020 as the DPWH was flagged by the Commission on Audit for delayed and unimplemented projects worth 100 billion pesos. A DOJ-led task force was formed to probe into supposed corruption in the government, focusing on the DPWH. The president has also named district engineers and lawmakers allegedly involved in supposed irregularities within the agency. Meanwhile, the Skyway Extension project of San Miguel Corporation and its contractor EEI also made headlines after a steel girder collapsed on vehicles in Muntinlupa back in November. This resulted in 1 fatality and 4 injuries. Just this week, SMC also saw the partial opening of its 18-kilometer Skyway 3 ahead of the new year. The project connects SLEX and NLEX and cuts travel time between the 2 expressways to just 20 minutes from 2 hours. The Transportation Department has also confirmed SMC's bid to operate and maintain the NAIA after Megawide lost its original proponent status to fund the major gateway's rehabilitation due to supposed financial incapacity. Megawide had since appealed the MIAA's decision. With economic managers banking on infrastructure to boost economic recovery in 2021, the sector has again secured a spot on the administration's top funding priorities. Under next year's budget, the DPWH bagged the second biggest slice of funds at almost 700 billion pesos, a far cry from the 286 billion pesos allocated for the health sector. The Budget Department is expecting infrastructure projects to generate 1.1 million direct and indirect jobs next year. Now, from the get-go, the Duterte administration has been laser-focused on investing in infrastructure, most so now to help the economy bounce back from the pandemic. But is this the right direction? To talk about that, we have on the show the chairman of the Build Committee, Lamentillo. Good morning, Anime.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, Anime. So, of course, you heard the introduction. That was quite a long discussion, or a long report, really, on what has happened, at least in the infrastructure program of the government over the past year. But you see, when you talk about infrastructure spending, that has been down by as much as 18% in the 10 months to October. That failed to pick up as well in the month of October. Would you say that was purely pandemic induced, or was also there a conscious decision to actually rein in spending for the sake of maintaining a good credit rating?
Right now, I think all the big ticket projects of DPWH is a go. We've been working very hard to ensure that they are implemented on track. For example, Skyway Stage 3, as you've mentioned, was partially opened yesterday. And I think now people who have been previously criticizing the project can now believe that it was indeed possible to connect SLEX and NLEX within a 30-minute time frame. But what's good about this project is that there's a master plan behind it. So Skyway Stage 3 will eventually be connected to um, to NLEX Harbor Link, which connects Quezon City to Manila, Valenzuela, Caloocan, and Navotas via the NLEX SLEX connector, we've already started to build at this stage. We are expected to complete the connection between the Skyway Stage 3 and NLEX Harbor Link in 2021 via the NLEX SLEX connector. What's good about this is that when we talk about the EDSA decongestion master plan, we're talking about 24 other projects. So it's not just going to be Skyway Stage 3, it's not just going to be NLEX Harbor Link. We're going to have a lot more projects by next year. So 2021 will be a big year for DPWH and Build. For example, we're going to complete finally the BGC or Tigas Link Bridge, which will connect Pasig and Taguig within a 12-minute time frame. We also have Pantaleon Estrella Bridge, which will also be completing by next year, which connects Makati and Mandaluyong. And then we also have Binondo Intramuros Bridge. What's good about these bridges is it will also have pedestrian lanes, so people can opt to bike in these bridges or walk if they want to. So this is the beauty of the paradigm that we're offering now in the Build. It's the ability to actually choose the transportation mode that you want to.
Okay, given all that, like what you mentioned earlier in your answer, that it's still pretty much a go here in terms of the government's build program. But the question is, despite that, infrastructure spending, like what I mentioned earlier, we're still down by as much as 18%. What do you think was the holdup there?
Oh, well, it's a natural consequence of not being able to build during the 3 month time during MECQ, because now contractors are only paid via their accomplishment. So whatever their accomplishment is, DPWH tenders them money. And I think this is one of the reforms of DPWH as an institution. Now we require geotagging prior to payment. So without the geotag photos and without the inspections, the construction companies couldn't actually receive payment from the government. This is to ensure that there are no more ghost projects in the department, because now the geotag information is actually inputted in our system even before the project starts. So the geographic information of these projects are actually inputted in the system even before a construction company won that particular project. And now they are required to submit geotag photos. Our monitoring engineers are also required to submit geotag photos, and the geographic information that was inputted in the system has to match the geographic photos, or else there will be an automatic warning as far as the project is concerned. Um, for instance, also now all the projects in DPWH are centralized into an automated computer software. So the contractors, as soon as they incur a 5% slippage of their projects, they get a warning and they get a catch-up plan requirement. Meaning, as soon as they have a delay of 5%, they need to submit to the department a catch-up plan on how to catch up with their particular progress. Uh, but of
Mhm.
course, there are differences in delays. Sometimes they are due to the fault of the contractor. Sometimes they are due to fortuitous events. For fortuitous events, we do not blame it for the contractor. So, um, yun. But
Okay.
the infra spending will catch up. It's just a natural consequence of the 3-month lockdown, wherein no construction company is actually allowed to work in the first place.
Okay, but given that still, of course, you have lockdowns being eased over the past few months, still, of course, infra spending failed to pick up at least even in the month of October here and in recent months. But let's move on from there, Anime. Let's talk about government really banking infrastructure to help aid the economy's bounce back in 2021. In fact, if you try to take a look at the 2021 budget, the funding for the DPWH actually overshadows the budget for health despite us being in a health crisis. Would you say that priorities at this stage are misplaced? Because there is a school of thought, that a genuine road to recovery is to focus really on health and social protection.
But you also have to understand that we have convergence programs with Department of Health. It's not infrastructure or health, it's infrastructure and health. So for instance, we DPWH is doing the quarantine facilities for COVID-19. We have just institutionalized um, the drawings for the pop-up hospitals, and we've actually constructed the first pop-up hospital for Quezon City just last week, and we invite anyone. So now these pop-up hospitals can be built easily and can handle um, mild to severe cases.
But if you try to if my research is right here, Anime, it would also appear that at least of the infrastructure budget, only around 20% will actually be allocated for the building of hospitals and health centers. Would you say that isn't that a token amount?
Again, it's because we have needs for flood control. We cannot discount flooding as a problem, for example, and we cannot stop projects halfway. So, for example, we are now doing the Pasig Marikina River Channel Improvement Project. We've completed phase 3, but we have to do phase 4. Now, the budget for these projects are done annually. Would you want to stop projects that will not really we will be able to get its full economic rate of return the moment the project is completed. And we want to assure you that these projects have a scientific basis behind it. For example, the Pasig Marikina River Channel Improvement Project, it will be able to decrease flooding within Metro Manila by at least 50% when we're done with phase 4 of the project. And this is designed by the Japanese government, by our Japanese counterparts. We also have the Plaridel Bypass project. We cannot stop projects midway because these are projects that really have a multi-year funding proposal. Um, the right of way acquisition for projects for PPP projects are being handled by the government. So we have to finish the BGC Ortigas Link Bridge. We have to finish the Pantaleon Estrella Bridge. We can't just build the foundation and then stop the bridge halfway. We won't be able. No one will be able to benefit from this project. But what we're happy about this project is that we were also able to generate a lot of jobs. In 2020, despite being a pandemic, we were able to generate about 1.52 million jobs um, for our construction workers. And this is the reason why the government was able to handle um, the influx of repatriated OFWs coming from almost everywhere. I mean, news have been reporting it. So a lot of our
Mhm.
workers from the Middle East are coming back, and BBB was able to absorb the workers coming in. And I think that's we're very happy about that.
Okay, and then lastly, anime, of course, when we're talking about public works here, that has pretty much been in the limelight the past few months, due, of course, to corruption issues here. Oh, what's the agency doing now following the president's directives, and what do you think has to change?
Well, we already have an independent task force. Secretary Villar has already instituted an independent task force to look into this particular matter. I will leave them to explain their findings. We have followed the president's directive. Secretary Villar has instituted all possible mechanisms to almost to minimize um, any possible corruption in the department. For example, now we have satellite technology that was not existent in the department before. Our biddings are now live streamed via Facebook and via social media. Um, the projects are being drone monitored. We have completely eliminated ghost projects just last year because of the full transition to the infra track system. Now, all the projects of the administration are under a computerized system. And then there's a 24/7 secretary's hotline that is able to handle all the complaints. I think we have opened all possible mechanisms to ensure that we minimize, if not eliminate, corruption in the department.
All right. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Again, I have a lot of things going, at least, especially in 2021, the government banking and infrastructure to help the economy bounce back. Thank you very much for your time, Anime Lamentillo, Chairman of the Build Committee.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chester.
I will have more of the news when Business World Live returns. Stay with us. And you're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos. President Duterte has exercised veto powers over several items in the 4.5 trillion peso 2021 national budget. Duterte rejected items mainly involving programs that sought to directly appropriate funds generated by government agencies. While his formal veto message to Congress has yet to be released, the unofficial copy listed rejected provisions involving income generated by the Labor Department and the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, or POEA. There were also some provisions seeking to tap funds of the Philippine Racing Commission, the Optical Media Board, and the excess dividends of the Subic Bay Metropolitan Authority, which the president vetoed. Other inappropriate provisions under the unofficial veto message involved the Agrarian Reform Department, the DTI, and the Transportation and Justice Departments. Palace spokesman Harry Roque noted that agencies are required to surrender their income to the National Treasury. He says any other use of the funds they generate would require authorization by a separate substantive law. The Energy Regulatory Commission has ordered Meralco to return at least 1.4 billion pesos in excess charges to its customers. That's on the back of the overcollection of transmission system loss, lifeline subsidy, and senior citizen discount rates from 2017 to 2019. At the same time, the regulator told the power distributor to collect almost 2.4 billion pesos, which represents under collection in the power generation charge. Meralco says the ERC order will mean a net average reduction of 11 pesos and 5 centavos per kilowatt hour in the pass-through charges for the first 3 months of implementation. This means that the Commission is allowing the company to recover around 935 million pesos of under-collected charges. The power distributor is required to submit a sworn statement of compliance within 10 days of implementing the new rule. The pandemic here has forced companies to adapt to a remote work setup, boosting the use of cloud computing and other IT services. To take a look back at the year that was in the IT sector, we have Rajesh Ganesan, Vice President of ManageEngine. Good morning, Rajesh. You join us live, of course, from India. Thank you for spending your time with us.
Good morning, Jester. Thank you very much for having me in your show. Always.
Okay, we do know that ManageEngine is in the business of IT management software. What has been, for you at least, the key trend for the year in the IT space, and what were the lessons learned by enterprises, especially when it comes to putting IT as a part of their core business?
Absolutely. 2020 gave life lessons to everybody around the world, right? So that's what we saw this year, something that none of us were expecting. But there were some real good lessons for enterprises around the world. So I have had the opportunity to continue talking to a lot of our customers. I would say the 3-4 points that I'm going to talk now were real learnings in the last year, last 10 months, so to speak. The first is the companies that actually were able to handle the tough situation, and not only handle, but also be able to thrive during the later part of the year, were companies who had real good IT maturity in terms of their processes, their operations, their tooling, and in their ability to deliver technology services across the enterprise, right? So typically the perception with the technology organization was you could outsource, right? So if you're a financial institution, or you could be in healthcare, you could be in manufacturing, you could be in power generation. These are enterprises that thought technology is a function that they can outsource, or they can afford to keep it at the back end. But what this year taught all of us is companies that thrive, that actually had this technology organization as one of their front lines, right? So how people, volunteers in healthcare, the real heroes, they help with people lives coming to the front line. In the context of business, IT was at the front line, right? Technology organizations were at the front line. So this is the most important learning, right? So you need to have the right investment, right perspective of how to deploy technology, right? So that is number one. Number two is also like, even for enterprises that had adopted a technology, they were not like giving the full monte, so to say, right? So say, for example, like how do you once a quarter check how prepared are you to face a disaster like this, right? So this expecting the unexpected was the next trend or next learning, I would say. Most companies were found wanting, not even running their disaster recovery drills periodically. So when the pandemic struck, they were like completely caught off guard. Again, companies that did well, where companies were always on their toes, ran their drill, were ready for taking up the situation. And the third trend was, this is something like I've had the opportunity to have a lot of conversation with enterprises around the world. This moving to the cloud or adopting to the latest technology. people always had this dilemma, right? Let me not jump in now. Let me wait for everybody else to jump in, and I'll wait and watch, right? And this strategy did not work for them, right? So you should have the ability to see the benefits that technology like cloud gives, and be able to at least strategically move parts of your business functions to the cloud, right? People that did not do that, again, were like going through a lot of problems. And finally, even people that had technology that ran disaster recovery processes, but who were not ready for a majority of their people to work from remote, they also faced a lot of struggle. Companies assumed, they simply took it for granted that all of these functions would happen from a single campus, right? And that assumption was completely broken this year, and where you had many architectures, right? So you had people, all of them working from home, some chunks of people being able to get together in a small office and could still work, right? So what I mean, like the other important learning was companies had to be ready to allow remote work for a majority of their employees. Companies that did not do that, again, faced a lot of problems. So these four, I would say, like were the top trends that customers spoke to us this year.
I want to drive further on your last point there about the remote work setup, Rajesh.
Right.
Do you see that still being sustainable come 2021? Especially, of course, we are already seeing the rollout of vaccines here. The Philippines, for one, is expecting this in the first quarter of 2021. So would you say that would still pretty much be sustained all throughout 2021? How do you see the work setup at least come next year?
Yeah, this is a important question. So I think we are at a stage where it is already beyond a point where we have to ponder if this is sustainable, because this has become a de facto model for a lot of companies. I mean, this concept of hybrid model, where you do not assume employees to be at your campus all the time, is already there, right? So see, the concept of remote work is absolutely not new. I have been doing that like last 15 years. I was able to work from my home, or whenever I was traveling for work or leisure, whenever needed, we could work online. But what happened this year is that's become the way of life, right? So every day when I wake up as an employee, I have the privilege to choose. Can I work from home today, or can I go to the office and take care of a few things, right? And this becomes very important for companies to enable this hybrid model, right, of allowing their employees, or majority of their employees, to make this choice every day for more reasons than one. It's not just the pandemic anymore. It is also for reasons like productivity, finding new talent, right? So you're no longer your campus, having to commute to your campus is no longer a barrier, right? So this model is here to stay, and it's already there, right? So for example, I could talk about our company. We have completely adopted a remote work model, and we are 10,000 people strong, right? And
Okay.
these are people spread across like 10 plus countries, and this model is here to stay, and it's
Okay.
going to be sustainable.
Very quickly now, Rajesh, one major pain point here when you're talking about the remote setup, especially here in the Philippines, is that we're still lagging, especially when it comes to connectivity here. What do you think has to be done? What workarounds should be done to at least compensate for that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this at a very high level. So when we talk about companies allowing employees to work from remote, obviously you are talking about deploying technology and deploying software tools to enable them to get this work done. So enterprises typically have their own IT function, the technology function, with a set of people who are delivering this technology services to their employees. And what used to happen predominantly so far has been this team, again, was under the assumption that they can only manage what they can see or what they can reach. Say, for example, I have a technology problem or a requirement, I call them up. Sometimes they would say, like, why don't you walk to me with your laptop or your device? I'll fix it for you, right? That has been the model, or even executives would call, right? So why don't you drop in into my cabin and fix this problem? So the model was you only managed what you could see and what you could reach, right? And again, that model is completely changing. You need a model where you can manage what you do not see, you do not see people face to face anymore, only video conferencing. And you also have to manage devices, your laptops, your tablets, mobile
Mm-hmm.
phones, your employees use without even being able to reach them. How do you do that? You have to deploy technology. So, which is where like companies like ManageEngine, we are investing a lot in building tools. We call it the endpoint management suite, ID service management suite, right? So, which would
Great.
sort of build this a self-service model. When somebody has a request, somebody has a problem with their technology infrastructure, they are no longer dependent on reaching out to a human anymore. The
Mm-hmm.
overall system has the ability to be self-sufficient, self-resilient, and even in the case of attacks, has the ability to self-defend, right? So
All
you
right.
have to move to a model where your infrastructure completely has this self-service IT delivery, which is where this conversational artificial intelligence, right? So we
Mm-hmm.
have
Okay.
the Alexa series at home, where you tell an Alexa to play a song like "Shape of Me," and if it plays a different song, it's still okay. But in a business context, you are like executing a transaction, dictating through a voice command. You want it to be 100% accurate, right?
All
And
right.
and
So definitely lots of changes here, at least when it comes to the workspace, and especially when it comes to technology
right,
adoption
right.
because of the pandemic. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Rajesh Ganesan, Vice President of Manage Engine. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure, Jester. Thank you so much.
And those are the biggest business news and insights today, December 30, 2020. Catch us again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News.
Sino siya? JC ko, siko. Hi, JC.
Wait lang po.
JC, good morning.
Hi, sir.
All right.